So, Anthony, you contacted me because you were interested in my take on what it is to be human.
That was a part of it.
And so I guess I'm quite interested in your angle on what it means to be human.
I think it's one of the most interesting spiritual experiences one can have. I um I have a belief that we are pieces of spirit or consciousness that are in this universe to experience everything that is. And yeah, being a human in itself is its own unique category, which is full of different experiences already. Um, yeah, that's a start.
Okay, yes. So I think on my life journey, very early on, very young, I got a similar belief. And I kind of believed we were all the same thing. It could be called spirit, or it could be called life, or whatever, right? The great mystery. Um, and yet we were all individual expressions of that great mystery. And I think I sort of created a fantasy in my mind when I was very young that each of us had some gold within us, some special thing to bring to the world. And if we were kind of put in the optimum circumstances with knowledge that that's what we were here to do, that's how we best thrive.
Yeah,
So, so how
absolutely.
does that fit in? It fits in
It
okay.
it fits in perfectly. It fits in perfectly. I I I use a model of representing the whole universe by just one human body. And in that model, even though maybe the scale is a little bit off, I see a human being as being a single cell in that model, which is represented by the whole human being being the universe. And so there are a lot of similarities in each cell. There are specialized cells. But if you take two skin cells, they might look very similar. There are some unique differences, and at the very least, they are unique in the space that they occupy. And that in and of itself is a uniqueness that no other cell can replace. It is doing the job of being a skin cell in that place. And I think of being a human being in a very similar way. There is no other human being that could replace being you in the exact time and place of your birth and life journey you've had and expression that you bring to the world.
Yeah, lovely. That I mean, that's in our field, in this field, that's a very common kind of idea that and I especially like. I remember thinking when I was young about how each cell knew how to form what part of the body in the womb, as an embryo growing into a baby, and it had to be something about its position in space and time, really. It's all, and that's subtle because each cell is doing a different thing. So it's only subtle movement which can change whether you're an eyeball or a toe. that sort of thing. And then, what I hear you're talking about is sort of like a holographic universe where everything's inside of everything, really Russian doll type. And my intuition feels comfortable with that idea too, as well, not instead of, but and
Mm.
The two seem to go really well together. And it just makes me question, how do you know this intuitively? How do I know this intuitively? Lots of different people, but lots of different walks of life, actually. They're not all sort of, what shall we call people, like cosmic-minded people. I'm going to use that term. I'm not going to use any specific term other than that for the moment. They're not, some people are really down to earth, and biology and cutting edge science has a similar sort of idea of how it could be. So there's all these people who do know. And yet the vast majority of people, when I look at what's happening on the planet, at what we're told is happening on the planet at the moment, the horrors, how do so many people, how are we still in the 21st century so far away from this, where really this knowledge is ancient knowledge, but I suppose it's growing, isn't it? There is more and more people getting hold of the metaphysics of being a human being, I think, today. But we need more. I think that's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like a double-edged sword. As we have evolved, we've created new technologies which have added conveniences and efficiencies. But when we have and we find those conveniences or efficiencies, like when we are able to create copper and tools, when we are able to create cell phones and internet, we're like, wow, these are so great. So we're high on all the efficiencies and the benefits that we get in that moment. And we get sucked into normalizing them, and it's great for some time, but it takes a while to be able to realize that there are downsides to some of our advancements. And I think one of the major things, one of the major trends that we've experienced as a species is moving from hunter-gatherer tribes into these mega cities. And on one hand, there's a huge benefit that it facilitates trade and it creates communities and it creates an efficient economy and all of that. But on the other hand, it's quite toxic for our health to be disconnected from nature, to be so full of technology. And I think the reason we are where we are at right now in the 21st century is we're at this culmination point where we are starting to realize, oh, actually, there are downsides to technology and advances and things that we've created, not the least of which global warming, mental health crisis, addiction to tech, disconnection from ourselves, our communities, our purpose. And yeah, so I think it's leading the way to more work.
There's a lot of anxieties on the planet at the moment, with everything that's going on, the wars and the hate and the crime. And also, I don't really want to go too much into a sort of political conversation at all. But I can see that the way certain layers are thinking about the planet and what goes on the planet and what's actually happening at ground level and the different logical layers all the way down, it's like certain people are missing out great big chunks of what's happening at other levels, or just can't incorporate it in their thinking. The reality tunnel is too focused in where they're at and maybe missing some incredible gems. I kind of, rather than sort of looking at the technology side of it, I kind of look at what we are. And I go, look, we're a miracle to begin with. The fact that we even exist, this life, what is it? If you look scientifically, what they already understand about life, it's incredible. And then looking at the elements of what needs to be incorporated into your life, or what you learn as you go through life, the different lessons as you go through life that are just there in life. You don't have to necessarily adhere to a religion or a system or whatever. Life is going to dish out lessons, one way or the other. You know, as a coach, and I have done counseling as well, I've listened to people's stories. And, you know, the stories are all, to me, there's a sort of ongoing story that, you know, where are you in the story then? Or what area of the story are you dealing with now? And I can kind of remember being there. And it sort of, there's an archetypal aspect to life that I don't think we give wholly credit for. I think we used to, you know. I think the Greeks and, you know, deep philosophy, they were into it, you know, but you know, and even Jung and various aspects, you know, various different theorists through time have been into it. But still, it's not common knowledge. It's not something we all do. Are you ready to tell your story? That's what I always want to say to people. What's your story? How do you make sense of this, your life, you know? It's a miracle that we're even here.
Yeah,
And I can
absolutely.
out that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think no matter how much experience or what you have, you know, even an 8-year-old could be a coach to a 2-year-old. You know, you don't have to have that much life experience to be where someone has been and recognize, yeah, I don't really remember that time where I couldn't walk, but I must have been there. You know?
Yeah, and even a 2-year-old can teach an 8-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 80-year-old something. We can all
Yes.
learn from each other. I can always remember in my NLP training, it was when I was introduced to the idea of paranoia. And I don't know if you know that term, paranoia. Well, you know the term paranoia is where people think everybody's secretly out to get them. Paranoia is when you think everybody's secretly out to help you. And it's an attitude. And
I yeah, I
you
think
can
I
literally,
experienced that when I was having mental health issues. When I was hospitalized, I was experiencing that. I didn't know there was a word for it. Uh,
so is that what was happening? People were
I
secretly out to help you?
yeah, I had this duality. I had this duality that um the people in the hospital were holding me against my will, but there were other people and other beings beyond them that were plotting to help me. And I think perhaps in a way, just having gone through that and having those memories and it being and feeling super real, there is something about that which, you know, science hasn't quite been able to explain yet, but I think eventually we might be able to. Or even if not, then spiritually and experientially we can. We can make sense of what has happened to us, because if it has happened, then that means there's nothing existentially in the universe that stops this from being a legitimate thing to be able to happen.
Have you got a way of doing that in your own mind then, through your own experience? Can you make sense of it? The dichotomy?
I think now, yes, much more, because I have a lot more context and a lot more explanation as to why I might have been in those states. Yeah. But it was quite a journey to be able to connect those dots. And there were a lot of things that I had no idea about. Some of which were education based, some of it, you know, was stuff that I just didn't know. And some of it were I don't know how to phrase it, but more repression, memory, like built-in based. They were within me, the knowledge, but there were also systems within me that were blocking me from accessing those thoughts and feelings until um, until more was known about my situation.
Okay, so that, I mean, there's lots of things I could ask you about that are very interesting. But I don't know how deeply you want to go into that, Anthony.
I'll go wherever the conversation goes.
Okay, so so as I understand it, there was sort of at a certain stage when you were in the mental hospital, you were on the one hand thinking that they were holding you there against your wishes, really.
Mm-hmm.
The other hand, you had the feeling that there were forces secretly out to help you. And what I'm kind of curious about is how, in your own mind, did those two merge together? And what did you do to merge those two together in your mind as
Yeah.
process?
Mm-hmm. Um, for one, I had um I had been given no explanations that made sense to me about why I was there. For me, I would maybe almost describe it as a spiritual awakening. It was my first psychosis that led to this hospital visit. And when I accessed the things that I experienced, I thought I was accessing some of the deepest secrets of the universe. I thought I was, floating around in space-time, having a deep connection with God, source, and and seeing the fabric of the universe and understanding experientially how it was made and explaining that like, oh, this life is actually effortless and there's actually no reason to be hung up on stupidities like work. I mean, it was what I would call it at that time. Um, but to have these thoughts and then to express them in society where most people, I would say, have not had this kind of experience, um, and are very much, you have to fit into this box. If you are acting or if we observe that you're thinking in ways that are way outside of this box and there's too much of a disconnect with our communication, then that means that you have to be here in the mental health hospital. And we don't even need to tell you why, because you're not going to understand that you are in a place where you're not going to be able to help yourself or something along those lines. But I was never, I never had time one-to-one with a person to say, look, you are here because blah, 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 blah. And that means that blah, blah, blah. It was just like, follow along. Here's your room. You don't see the professional, for whatever. I have a conscious memory of having interacted with professionals for maybe 1 hour. And it was just like, yeah, it was weird questions. And I was answering them weird to them because I was in this state of mind of being connected to all that I just said. And so now I make peace with that because I realize that in the same way that I've had my blind spots about mental health and about, let's say, trauma and all those things, I realized that you can't know what you don't know. And I mean, I knew that in theory, but I realized it on a much deeper level, having made sense of my mental health experience through acquiring more knowledge and actually being able to being able to manage my mental health and my biochemistry naturally.
Where did you get that extra knowledge from? What knowledge did you get?
So I'd say there are three pillars that have happened over the last 4 years. One of them was finding a strong sense of purpose. Um, the purpose in coaching, I was coached into it. I was asked powerful questions, and then I was like, oh, I want to do that. That's what I want my life to do. Um, the second pillar was the specialized training I did as a coach in flow states. And that for me connected a lot of the highs that I was seeking in unnatural ways. Like I would take a lot of psychedelics, stimulants, I would smoke, I would drink. All of these highs, I was chasing love, acceptance, and flow states. And when I discovered that flow was trainable through productivity, and one of the big pillars of training flow is motivation and purpose, then it suddenly clicked that like, the productivity stuff is allowing me to better manage my neurochemistry, and the motivation and the purpose is giving me a natural stimulant already. So I don't need those unnatural substances. And then the third pillar was the emotion and trauma work, which is actually the one that I'm least familiar with and that I only encountered about 2 years ago. That one was my most of a blind spot, because if you had asked me 3 years ago, what does any human need to be a superhuman performer? I would have said, all you need is flow and a strong sense of purpose. That's it. That's it. And little did I realize that even when you had these two things, you can still be self-sabotaging, which I was doing with emotional eating. And it took a lot of digging to figure out, actually, there's a psychological cause to this. It's not me. It's not that I'm a bad person. It's not that I have poor willpower or poor discipline. It's actually that there's some blind spots and some trauma issues and some emotional work that needs to be done. And as soon as I discovered that and started doing the work, lo and behold, my symptoms started decreasing. So it was the same thing with mental health. And when you combine all of those things, then your situation improves by quite a lot, I would say. And
Without
so
giving too
to
much
to
detail, can I
to
just ask?
relate it one more thing with the blind spots, because I had such a huge discovery with blind spots, not knowing about trauma, for example,
Mhm.
I am able to realize that, okay, the medical system, they didn't know enough about me and my story, and maybe they're not trained to ask me those questions, or have the care tailored exactly in the way that I needed it. Um, and so I don't hold a grudge against them. It's how I make sense that they were holding me there because they didn't know any better, in the same way as I was emotional eating because I didn't know any better.
That's fabulous. Just one question on that about what trauma. Well, I'm not asking you to tell me about your traumas. I'm asking you to tell me about what methodology you were using with your to help you
Process it.
process it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, my first experience with a psychosomatic therapy is a process that's actually freely available on YouTube. It's amazing. It's called Feeding Your Demons by Lana Tsultrim Alyon. It's an ancient Buddhist technique actually developed by women or a woman to help people deal with their inner demons. And it's a fully internal process, but at the same time, it's a visualization, it's a meditation, and it's also somatic, body-based, in the sense that you identify where your intention is coming from in the body and then visualize it. So that was a kind of, I wouldn't be able to categorize that in any modality. It's like its own thing. And I always recommend that process to anyone who hasn't.
Remind me what you said again.
It's called Feeding Your Demons.
And by who?
Lana Tsultrim Alione.
Okay.
Um, If you look up on YouTube, Feeding Your Demons, you'll find it. Um,
That's fantastic. I'll definitely have a look at that. I'm always interested in seeing different people's processes. I look at them a lot.
yeah, no, it's a great process. But that one aside, um, I did a lot of education about the theories of what trauma is, how it shows up, and different modalities. So I listened to a lot of podcasts. I read a few books by Gabor Mate, Peter Levine, um, um, Bessel van der Kolk. And at the same time as I was doing that, because on one hand, I wanted an understanding as a practitioner to be able to incorporate trauma work and be trauma informed in my practice. On another hand, I found a practitioner who was trained in compassionate inquiry, so Gabor Mate's modality, plus internal family systems, Dick Schwartz, um, and somatic experiencing, or some kind of somatic aspect to it. Plus 5 rhythms like facilitation, dance, music, kind of
Yeah.
movement facilitation. And that combination was just fantastic. Yeah, I worked with this person for yeah, for quite a while. And that's really what led to the most amount of progress. Those are the different modalities that I experienced, kind of in equal distributions on a session by session basis.
So would you say, out of experiencing all of those different modalities, that out of that has sort of emerged your own golden sort of combination of all these different modalities, or are you sort of being selective and using each one fully, or have you sort of merged and made something of your own?
I'm still creating the thing of my own. Because I come from an engineering background, I use that very logical engineering process, the same process that engineers use to design cars and spaceships. I use that to help people, rewire their brain naturally based on just here are all the options, like the design things that could be done. What's your feeling of what would help you the most? And if you don't have an idea, then I can suggest a few things. But still developing my own thing. Yeah.
Cool. That's brilliant. It's interesting because you remind me of lots of different things that have happened in my own life to come up with my own sort of ideas on what it means to be human and how I work with people. And something has gradually emerged, but it's still emerging, and it will always emerge, because I think what emerged first of all started when I was about 4, which is quite young. But when I was young, I had this split in my conscious awareness too. And it was really, I had a very difficult childhood. And I don't want to, it's not, this isn't a sort of, it's sort of poor me story, but it was a difficult childhood. I was adopted, and I didn't really bond with my adopted family properly. And I was the only child, so I spent a lot of time on my own. And I could also get into trouble very easily. And I never had a clue how to behave. Like, the rules weren't clear. So it was kind of bonkers to me. It's like, oh God. And then you'd be told, lying's, you can't lie. And then you hear people, the adults in your life, lying. And then if you say, well, you lied there, they go, get out, go, you're in trouble again. I spent my life in this sort of trouble as a child. And and I didn't really have anybody I ever played with until I got to school. And school was kind of like a horror show for me. So I started off and I'll just say the first 40 years of my life were kind of sort of, they were a tragedy. I can look back and laugh at it now. So it was a sort of tragic comedy from where I'm looking now. But at the time, I was in all sorts of turmoil and trauma, as you're talking about. And at a very, very young age, I'd get into trouble and I'd get sent to my room and I'd cry. And then I'd start feeling fake. I'd listen to myself crying and I'd go, oh my God, I sound so fake. Crying, what are you doing? You want somebody to come and say, oh, it's all right. But they didn't come. And so my mind invented this way of comforting myself in my imagination, which got very cosmic. So it got so strong and cosmic that I ended up believing I was in an experiment. See, it must be very paranoid. I was in an experiment. And in the experiment was to see if a child who wasn't told what life was really about could figure it out for themselves. That's what I thought. And I would trip out on this concept as a little child. And I had this little routine where I'd sort of go out into space and I'd fly through the stars. And I'd end up inside of a huge, great big cosmic ball. And I'd think to myself, oh, how do I get out of this cosmic, huge, great big cosmic ball? And then I'd have to sort of become the periphery of the ball, the inside of the periphery of the ball. And then it would all get really trippy. And then I'd end up losing consciousness at a certain stage. But I'd end up always coming back, and I would always come back from above, from right above my head. And like that line that's going through your head now as I'm looking at you, that white line, there'd be like, doo, and it would go boom, and it would go back in, and I'd go inside. And it used to say to me, and I say it because it was like sort of a whisper, see, out there is in there, out there, in there. It's true for everybody. And that was the very first thing that my mind used to do. So I kind of understand that now, that I was in shock. And because I was in shock and couldn't make sense of things, my imagination started pulling archetypal sense into my body, which took years to make real sense of. But as I went through life and I was learning, and I kept falling into terrible things happening that were just awful and very heartbreaking, I gradually started learning that there was a metaphysical aspect to life, and there were lessons to life, and I could tune into them and I could learn them. And in fact, they were written about in all sorts of different places, but you kind of had to figure out and join it together. And I forgot the idea that I was in an experiment and everybody knew what was going on. I realized at some point they didn't know what was going on either, right? But I did secretly believe that what I was being taught was true for everybody. And that thought stayed, even if they didn't know it, it was true for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I evolved and evolved. And when I was 40, I got NLP. I trained in NLP. I started off, actually, I was ill and very ill. I worked restoring antiques, and my arms wouldn't work anymore. My legs had gone weird, and I was always tired. And they said I had chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and ME and all these other different illnesses that people tend to get, which I think is actually just loads and loads of inbuilt stress. And a friend of mine went on an NLP course with Richard Bandler and Paul McKenna and Michael Breen. And he came back and he brought back these CDs, trance CDs. And and some videos, actually. It was the videos that got me looking at Richard Bandler and going, wow, I don't know what that guy's doing, but I think I need to learn it. I'm really interested. Now, the guy who came back was now evangelical NLP, which was awful, by the way. Right? Somebody who's a newbie to NLP and they come back and then asking you all these weird meta questions all the time, right? It's a bit much. But Richard and his videos were just, it was the, what series was it called? The State of the Art series. I don't even know if they're available, but they were very, very good. And I was very impressed with Richard Bandler. So I plugged myself into his trance CDs, which were the personal enhancement series. And there's 6 CDs that you're meant to listen to. There are 6 trances you listen to in order, and then you can listen to. I just plugged myself into them. Wonderful suggestions and really good stuff. But it was the trance work that really got to me. And I started learning that I'd never really been able to unwind my nervous system. And if I relaxed in a certain way, I could completely unwind my nervous system. And then if I did it, said laying down, my awareness would spread out like the surface tension of water in a pool. It would be, really, really floaty, and I'd feel supported, and I could get all these different feelings come on that I hadn't really experienced ever before in my life. And so this added a whole new thing, the whole new meditation thing to my life, which I still do to this day. And it added a whole new way of understanding how people work, how their minds work. I think this is fascinating, right? So I never ever forget the day I learned this. Somebody on stage at one of the courses said, they said, the cat sat on the mat. And then he looked at a woman and he said, "What colour's your cat?" And she said, "Tabby." "And what colour's the mat?" "Black." Then he said to another woman, "Where's your cat?" And she said, "Oh, it's in a cottage by the fire." And I'm sat there thinking, what? Where are they getting all this information from, right? Well, when you say the cat sat on the mat, I couldn't really see anything, it was because there wasn't enough information. But these people had automatically sort of stuck from out of the substance of their mind all this visual imagery to that sentence. And I thought that was fascinating. Now, I did eventually find my picture. And my picture was like down here somewhere by my hip. And it was a tiny little thing about that big, which was a white line with a little circle and a smaller circle and 2 little sticks on top. I had a little stick cat because he hadn't said, think of a flamboyant cat sat on an elaborate mat. My imagination works perfectly well, but it doesn't. I'm quite literal, so I didn't go plastering stuff onto it. But it did show me that when I'm working with people, the substance of their mind operates really differently. So if I'm working with somebody, I know that when I'm working with them, I'm working with somebody, I can understand the basic principles of them being a human being, but how they run that is up to me to discover, for them to tell me and work out between us how to get that running for them the best way possible.
Yeah. I'm curious to know when did you have that thought of being in the experiment?
Oh, when I was about 4.
That was 4, yeah?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And so how do you feel about that idea now in the present moments?
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely in an experiment. We all are.
Magical intuition, from 4-year-olds.
Yeah, no, I mean, life is experimental. Whatever's going on here, it's evolving, and evolving is, does this fit together? Can we do this? Can we do that? Divide and synthesize, all over and over and over again. I mean, that's what's happening always as a rhythm. We're breathing, the movement. There is a movement. I love that thing. In the beginning, there was a word. And what is a word? It's a vibration. And what is a vibration? It's a movement.
Yeah.
And I think the trick is, and what is really why people don't really grasp it, is because nothing moved. The movement happened before there was something. In my intuition, the movement happened and the movement created something. It's not something moved.
Mhm.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
It's I think that's the thing where people go, how can we have
Yeah.
anything moving? But
One of the biggest starts to my healing journey has been a spiritual journey, actually. And it reminded me to share this because you talk about sound and movement, and what came to my mind is the question that I was exploring is, who am I? What am I? And I read a spiritual book recommended by a friend of mine. Um, the book is called I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj. And the whole book um, does not talk about what you are. It talks about peeling the layers of what you are not until you get to an understanding of what you are. And you can go as deep as you want, but the point is you realize, okay, if I do a thought experiment and I cut my fingernails, does that make me not me? No. If I cut my hair, does that make me not me? No. If I take off my clothes, does that make me not me? No. If I were to chop my arm off, does that make me not me? No. And so, like, peeling back layers by layers by layers, I realized actually, um, yeah, I am not this body. Even when I was thinking about death and what happens after death, and a lot of my thoughts on psychedelics and my thoughts in mental health crisis were about connecting with these concepts that science does not have an explanation for. Science does not know what happens after death. No human can claim this is what happens in the same way as we can claim that the physics of throwing a ball, we have equations for that. Um, and so in order to be comfortable with explaining the stuff that I did not know or couldn't explain via the knowledge that didn't exist yet, or scientific side of things, um, I went into spirituality and I found more and more answers, or at least created answers that made sense to me and matched my experience. And that was really reassuring. Um, yeah, to be able to know that other people have thought about these things before and even suggested very similar things that explain your experience better than any science could. And actually, in some ways, spirituality is science. We have this artificial uh, distinction that I'm gonna put forward as just an artificial distinction that we've created from language. Yeah.
yes, spirituality is an interesting word, isn't it? Because some people, if they're not tuning into what I understand you mean by spirituality, uh, um, I would use words like thoughts, emotion, inspiration, and they're completely comfortable with these words. And I like to think of like our soul is like spirit condensed into flesh, and at the root of our being, where when the sperm hit the egg, that moment, that spark of life, in comes spirit, and it condenses into flesh, and it puts life into this little area in space time to make this wonderful little being grow. And I like so I like to think of that as sort of that's it, and it's very impressionable. So when we're born, all the things that happen are sort of impressing on it so it can create a way of engaging with the world. So if we've got nice impressions, we camber up this way. Or if we've got horrible impressions, we might be avoiding and trying to grow this way. And often we end up repressing our soul's true nature because the world is a bit too harsh. Soul is quite soft and exquisite, very strong when it's allowed to grow. But to begin with, it needs gentle nurturing, and we don't always get that. That's how my mind kind of sees it with people. And also, I can tell with people when they're talking to me about their lives and their childhoods, and I can already tell what's happened in their childhood, what they must have encountered, certain patterns. They must have encountered this, not a mother, not a father, different parents, over-loving parents. You get some people that have wonderful childhoods, and when they get into their adult years, the whole world isn't welcoming to somebody who's just hi, want to be nice, and they encounter people who just don't want to be nice, and it's like harsh. That's a harsh reality for a soul.
Yeah, yeah. We're living in a world of I don't know how to put it, but it's like the lesser of two evils that we often have to pick. We don't pick between good and neutral or neutral and bad. We often pick between bad or worse. And just it gets into the complex and political and historical why we are in this place. But at the end of the day, a parent has to prepare their children for the world which exists, which that they are in right now. And in and of itself, it's a pretty traumatic world. And so the preparation for it involves a bit of having to toughen up, having to go through some traumatic experiences. Yeah, I think the good news is that people are waking up now to the fact that there is trauma, and we're understanding trauma as mental wounds in a certain equivalent as physical wounds. And we're also understanding that we can heal them.
It is also physical. Mental wounds are physical wounds because they create scarring
Yeah.
in the brain, in the physical brain. And
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I've done quite a bit of study on the consequences of abuse. And, I can honestly say, if I took anybody on the planet, I genuinely believe this, and I don't care if they're the worst oligarch or anybody, crazy person, wonderful person, if you sit them down and you ask them questions about their life and how they came to make the conclusions that they've made and make the choices that they've made, make the decisions that they made, have the values and beliefs and the strategies that they use, it makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
That's all we know. I can forgive a lot of us, but I'm not going to forget it, because
Yeah.
we need to name a few improvements that can be made. When in a lot of areas, and especially with this whole technological thing, like you were talking about earlier, we're missing that the human being is the most incredible entity. And some of us that have been fortunate enough to kind of slip through not too much heavy programming and enough trauma to wake up to learning and wanting to learn and wanting to relate to others, wanting to collaborate with others, which I think is a really important thing. There are people who are doing that. And we can see that there's all sorts of ways that we could improve life on Earth rather than, go with the old idea that war is a money-making process or something, which some people still seem to think is acceptable. I don't. It's the 21st century. Come on, we can evolve. Human beings are allowed to evolve out of their old behaviors into better ones.
Mm,
I think there's some people on the planet that think a lot of people living on the planet today are totally expendable.
yeah.
And they're too much. They haven't got the intelligence to think, oh, how can we educate these people? How can we give these people the opportunity to come out with their gold? I know people because I work with young people who do music and all sorts of things, and I talk to different people around the world. There's incredible music artists out there that have no money, have no way of getting their stuff recorded or anything. But we're missing all that golden stuff that they could actually produce
Mm,
because there is the funding to go. So if there's that with music, there must be that with everything.
yeah.
You know, we're not all a bunch of useless eaters, as I have heard a lot of people describe them. That's how
Wow.
we've been described by some people.
Yeah, that's a description that hurts. Um, I yeah,
There's gold, and they're not mining it, and
yeah,
we are mining it, but when it needs more people to understand exactly what is possible. And
yeah,
I think what really shapes it up is if we can access the power of genuine collaboration. And not many people know how to do that because we're still struggling with our individual.
yeah.
We've
There's
been
this
trained, we've been trained to have egos.
individualism. Yeah, individualism is one of those things that is disconnected from our nature. We didn't evolve individual. If you had to survive as a hunter-gatherer being an individualist, you would struggle. They're probably all dead. We all survived because we were social creatures. We were collectives. We worked together to leverage efficiencies. Few people hunting, few people gathering, few people building things. And
I 100% agree with that, but I add on that we need to be able to fully accept that and then embrace that we are all individuals with our own piece of gold to add to
yeah,
that. So to respect each other
yeah,
as, okay, what have you got to bring? What have you got to bring, Anthony? What have you got to bring, Joy? What have you got to bring, everybody?
yeah,
To let's look at this and see what wonderful things we could put together, create a new, fairer financial system. And
mhm,
I'm not, this whole thing of, oh, you're left or you're right or something. Somebody the other day was accusing an event I'm going to speak at as being far right. And I'm thinking, they're trying to say I'm far right. That's so bonkers. It's like they weren't saying I was far right. They were saying that other people going to the event were far right, but they weren't. In my mind, they weren't far right either. What's far right is, well, I looked it up, and traditional conservatism on one hand, but then there's this sort of far right personality, which sounds more like a conspiracy theorist or
mm,
somebody
yeah,
who's very limited in their thinking,
yeah,
which I don't come into that at all. And the whole
mm,
political seesaw thing, I don't like seesaws as a left, right, left, right. I
yeah,
think that's a stupid idea. We need something that moves forward, cycles. We
yeah,
need a movement, not a seesaw, a bicycle or something that takes us forward, not banging away at a seesaw that just isn't a form of transport and it won't go anywhere.
yeah. Yeah, I really do believe that the world has more than enough resources and abundance for everyone to have their needs met and to express their unique gifts and gold. It's just that the systems that we have created so far are not the most conducive to that yet. I think over time, I think we will get towards a more fair place because, well, it depends on whether new generations want humanity to survive or not for 500 years or more. It's as simple as that. Because this idea that there's I don't like dichotomies either. But there is one that I will share just for illustration purposes. In a lot of tribes, they they talk about oneness with nature and treating nature as something like a parent, because nature is the one that provides the food, the animals, the water, all of that. And let's say
Mother Earth, Father Sky.
Exactly. And on the opposite end of that, and I'm not going to label the kind of people or societies, but there is this other side that is treating the earth as a material possession that can be used at will and disposed of, not realizing that they themselves, their body, is literally made of earth materials, and would not be continuing if it weren't for nature and earth. And so coming back to embracing that we are not separate from the earth. We are a part of it. We are one living, breathing being, in the same way as that there are bacteria in our guts that are living and breathing inside of us. We are the same, but on earth. It's not like the earth is a device that I get to use to fulfill my purposes and not care. And I think more and more people are realizing that, and we have to if we want to survive as a species.
I think I agree that that we are kind of an aspect of the Earth's crust as a species, like all other species. We are an aspect of the living moving aspect of the Earth's crust. I think the Earth is perfectly capable of sorting itself out in some way or another. I think that I think that there are certain people, and they see the way. I think there's another aspect to this as well, what you've just described, that was sort of like a dichotomy, but I'm seeing a third aspect where there are people who are running the economy and looking at what they can do, and they see us as consumers that are so programmed in consuming that they can't figure out how to make resources stretch around the world so everybody on the world can consume the same way. And if we did, it wouldn't be useful for the planet. So they think, well, have less people on the planet, then we can make enough more for everybody and we can produce a better world. I think that's probably a little bit technological as well, brought in. So I think from my perspective, there needs to be sort of an education, even like a global referendum on what sort of world do we want? What would we buy into? What could we, as a group, as a collective? No, I know that's pretty idealistic. I am
Yeah.
Pisces, so I'm allowed to be super idealistic. That's
Mm.
my job. And we've got to look at ideals, and we've got to look at what is feasible. Some people can imagine this. I'd like to mention it. Some people can imagine a world where most of the good people on the planet want to work together, and we've got a lot of work to do considering where we're at the moment. But
Yeah.
we do have the technology, and we do have the knowledge. It's the matter of getting people on board. Well, we're never going to get people on board if we use our TV and our media like we're using it at the moment. And also they kind of try and motivate us into being fearful all the time. Well, that's not going to help. You know, we need to be brave and courageous and be open to say, hang on a moment, we can do better than this. I want to do better than this. I don't mind you having differences in opinion to me, but on certain things, we need to collaborate and we need to be able to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
At
Yeah.
least give it a go. At least talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of us aren't even conscious that this is going on, or that we as individuals have a part to play in it. But actually, the collective is nothing more and nothing less than all of its individuals put together.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. And one of the reasons why I thought the idea of us having this conversation is, you know, I think there should be more conversations and yeah, let's open it up a bit and see what we can all come up with and just start talking.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. The world needs more conversations for sure. We're very stuck in our little worlds, worried about our own little problems, and also spending so much time in our addictions, whatever they may be too, um, that we miss this idea that conversations can be had.
I've been having conversations like this for years with random people that are not even on the internet. I know some amazing characters are not on the internet. If I walked in and said, right, I'm putting up a camera here and we're going to record this, I'd think I was mad. But there's people out there who have some really clever ideas
Yeah.
and looking at life so differently, with so much aesthetic
Mhm.
added in, so much sensory goodness and inspiring charge of life within, you know. You know, it's exciting with some people, but we need more people doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Each one of us is on our unique journeys about figuring out what is our uniqueness, what is our purpose, where are we going, what's our unique expression, what are we bringing to the world and to this universe. You know, if it hasn't happened yet, it's just a matter of time and trying new things, exploring different things, having more conversations.
Right, I'm just going to stop recording for a second. Don't worry, you can keep recording if you want to.
No worries at all.
But I just want to get some more water,
Oh yeah, great.
and
I'll
then shall we go into talking about, you know, I'll ask you about how you help people and you ask me how I help people. We could do that. That would be
yeah,
quite good.
sure thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll go
Okay.
grab some water as well.
Okay, Anthony, as you take that nice sip of water, would you like to tell me a little bit more about how you actually work with people? What sort of work do you offer? I know you were talking, I saw that you were sort of talking about people who are not neurodivergent and helping them get to a better place with that. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, what I do helps people get where they want to go faster. Um, it can apply to any goal really, but it's particularly useful for neurodivergent because I teach a little bit of a basic model of understanding the brain, understanding neurochemistry, understanding states of consciousness, and really teaching the the behaviors that lead to different things so that we have an awareness of, when we're getting distracted, why is that? When we're energized, why is that? When we're feeling sluggish, why is that? When we're feeling motivated, why is that? Um, so it's really the niche kind of productivity stuff that not many people know about, which happen to train flow, that help us behave in ways that are more aligned with our biology and less self-sabotage.
Okay, so that's tuning people more into the flow state.
Yeah, training flow through productivity, if that makes sense.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Mm.
So I like what you were saying earlier on, where you were engaging productivity with your almost your addiction to be able to keep that exciting and interesting enough to keep engaged with.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it can also be used as a little bit of a trauma healing, actually, when we experience more flow and when we experience the positive cycle of more flow and more results and reaching more goals faster, we start to let go of the behaviors that don't serve us so much, and we get more high on life and more high on our accomplishments than whatever we were doing as a cane, almost. I don't have a better word, like as a crutch was the word I was looking for. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
less reliant on our addictions as crutches, and we're more dialed into peak performance, flow, productivity, as a result. What about yourself?
Well, um, again, what I do can be applied to all sorts of different things. So I can work with people who have quite what appears to them complex problems, and they've often been to lots of other people before they've been to me, and come to me because somebody has said, oh, you should go and talk to Joy about this. So it could be as simple as helping somebody write a really articulate letter to get the point across. So really just tuning in to helping people. And I'm not talking, I mean, it could be applied to copy or anything, but I especially work with people who want to write very poignant letters. And so that's one thing I do. And I work with people, yeah, that have all sorts of different situations. Sometimes it's literally they want to improve something and they're already good at, or sometimes they have a problem or they need a solution to something. So we go in and find solutions. And also I've worked with people in traumatic states and help them, for example, if they're grieving or something very complex has happened, they're in shock, that sort of thing. I can do quite a lot of emergency immediacy on that sort of level, helping people manage their states so that they're tuning into the optimum state. So it's kind of like tuning into flow states. However, a lot of the time, it's tuning into real subtle stuff, making a difference. Is it that or is it that? So it's fine tuning to get people to access their best way forward. That would be a fair way of describing it.
Yeah, tuning into different and finer states is definitely a part of flow. What kind of ways do you work with trauma?
So Well, if I say I had somebody who was in trauma right now talking to me and needing help, or somebody who was just say, for example, I was running a supervision session and my supervisee was in trauma about their client and taking too much of that home with them. I would teach them a form of compartmentalizing, which people go, no, not compartmentalizing. But the way I do it is I do it in concentric circles, starting from their core and working outwards like an onion. And I find this becomes very manageable for people. Somebody's just going, so I wave to them. I find this becomes much more manageable for people. And one of the things I do is I run them through a meditation, which teaches people how to center within their own center, and center within their own center, and center within their own center, and pushing their center out to their periphery and making quite a tight periphery and getting a sense of that. Now, does that make sense to you? Or shall I give you a little description of how I do that?
I think a description would be, yeah,
Okay.
great.
So, for example, if somebody came, if I was talking like this into the camera, it would be too close, wouldn't it? So if I was meeting you in person, I was like sort of in your face like this, it would be like, hang on, what's going on? It goes blurry, it gets confusing. So I tune people into a distance where it feels absolutely comfortable and they get that feeling. And we all know that. I've only ever had one person say they didn't know that. And I did tell him he must be fucked, because it's a really important part of the whole thing, You need your boundaries. You need a sense of your boundary. And this is a sense of your own personal space, going around you and behind you, above you and below you. So you're like inside of your own personal bubble or sphere or something. So it's all the way around you. And then you take your center and you expand it. And there's various techniques I use for expanding it, but basically it's like a tube and it expands out to here, goes out to your neck, out to your shoulders, so it's all the way behind you as well, and then pops out in curves and goes ideally onto the inside of your own personal sphere. And we do that a couple of times. And so you're strengthening the density of this outside bubble. It gives you a sense of going in and going in and going in, and then you're centering. I also work a bit with balancing inside of it, backwards and forwards, and finding the center point. So you're really getting a good sense. And the midline's always there. It never goes away, even though you're spreading it out, a new one forms because it's within gravity. And I use the word gravity because it's a word that all of us can get. You know what it feels like. I say gravity hits the top of your head and sinks in. And it's there, it's sinking in. You know what I mean? It's not like Great Spirit is there and it sinks in. People go, is it? I don't know. But if you were talking gravity, it's so much easier. So I love the concept of gravity.
Yeah.
So I get people to really get a sense of immersing inside of their own space, breathing in there. This is your own space and you're free to breathe. Now, if somebody's in trauma, I will say, okay, are you happy for me to just run you through a little process to relax so you can actually talk about this without being quite so upset? And they'll go, yeah. And then what I do is I run them through another meditation, which lifts all that emotion without having to think about it up through the brain and pops that out to the top of the head, up to the top of the thing. So it starts moving round. And the unconscious is dealing with it now. We're just dealing with the moment. And this calms people down. And I can kind of get people to go into a far more meditative state and then look at the situation. And when they look at the situation, up it pops like a like a dream in the substance of their mind for them to look at. And then they can feel how their heart's attached to it and how their sense of knowing what their intuition feels about it, what their guts feels about it, whether they like it or they don't like it. It just slows everything down. So that's how I would start with dealing with trauma. It's a advanced work, but it really, really works for that sort of thing. And then whatever the situation is, you would design it from there on. I have every individual's different, so I would
Yeah,
design it according to the individual from there on. But
for
that's the
sure.
very basics.
Yeah, it sounds like a unique modality, one that isn't this or that therapy that people can just train in. It sounds like a unique thing.
It's literally been built out of what I experienced when I was a child, like out there is in there, that learning all the way through to the trances I was getting, listening to Richard, different meditations and different trances. I've listened to all sorts of people. I've done light body work. I've done all sorts of different things.
Mhm.
And all of it has added and added. But what I really found was that as I was looking at people and they're talking to me, I have become used to seeing them inside of their own bubble and how their hands were gesturing, or their eyes were gesturing, or their heads were gesturing, or their bodies were gesturing if they're in the room with me, would indicate what they're running and how they're running the substance of their mind. I call from the core to the periphery, the substance of your mind. And actually your mind is pretty much as big as you can make it with everything that you can possibly imagine in it. I find the imagination and imagining to be a core principle of tuning in to
Yeah,
manifestation, really, how to manifest what
absolutely.
you want to manifest. You need to tune
Yeah,
into actually what the imagination is. It's not just the imagination.
yeah,
Imagine is a big thing. And it's it's your way of shaping your life.
absolutely. Yeah, and there's a lot that imagination has to do with goals and self-belief and motivation. Because
Everything,
if
it
you
all
don't know
goes
where you're going, how are you gonna get there?
absolutely. And this whole thing about imagining now, I love Neville Goddard's work. He's I don't know, he's from the 30s or somewhere way back then, and he was doing all this stuff and talking, and he completely translates the Bible into telling you that God is the imagination. Now, I'm not a religious person. I believe in spirit and I believe in soul. I don't have a religion. I don't need a religion. I don't need to feel spiritual because I believe life is of spirit and of soul. And we're the conduit between what is ideal and what is not so ideal. And it's our job to shape that. I
Hmm.
mean, that's my personal fundamental
Yeah.
belief of what's going on here. Rather Taoist, I would say, if we were going to have to put a
Mhm. Label.
label. But I think I was Taoist before I ever knew the Tao even existed. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's all emerged over through time. And I just realized I was looking at my clients and I was thinking, oh right, they're moving that there, and they haven't got their guts turned on. Their heart's all in it, but they're not thinking properly about it. They're not, I could see what was lighting up and what's not lighting up. Not sort of physically, but talking to them, it would become apparent what they were doing in their minds and what they needed to do in their minds to make the difference that they wanted to make.
Mm,
Does that
yeah,
make sense?
it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah, it sounds like a wide panel of expertise that can help in yeah, many situations in a quite a deep way.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's all about advancement and taking things forward. I'm not looking at, NLP teaches not to look at your client's situation or is anybody being broken. You're not broken. It's just about getting this running better.
Yeah.
And how do you want it running? What do you want it to do? What do you want
Mm.
to accomplish?
Yeah,
Where do you want to head? And how to do that? It's great fun.
absolutely.
And I think for me, do you work, what was your age group, your sort of average age group that you work with?
It has tended to be 30s and 40s range. Yeah, it just has tended to be. But there has been outside of that range for sure. And I haven't restricted um potential clients to certain demographics. I think if we resonate, if we share some values, if you like the ideas that I share, then I'm here to help. I'm not going to say if you're not this age range or you're not this kind of profession, I'm not going to help. Um, yeah, I believe we're needing to shift into a more conscious, collaborative, co-creative world.
I often work with 12 to 19-year-olds in the studio. And lots
Yeah.
of the people that come in will have been diagnosed as neurodivergent or
Mm.
autistic, Asperger's, something along those lines. So for that sort of age group, if you could send a message to them in what beliefs to adopt to help them most and extract the most out of life, what would that be?
Ooh. You still have a lot to experience, and don't let your current experience fix your beliefs in such a way that the future is not going to be better. The future can be whatever you want it to be. Um, yeah, mind and body are changeable, and regardless, everyone's perspective is has something to bring to the world. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. That's the thing, isn't it? Everybody's perspective has something to bring to the world.
Yeah.
We need a perspective bank.
Yeah. I wanted to mention one more thing.
Okay.
Um, the stuff that I do helps a lot with ADHD because it has to do with channeling focus. Flow only happens in the here and now and in the focus. And doing my own research on ADHD, I came across this book, ADHD, A Hunter in a Farmer's World. Have you heard of it?
No, but I love the title. It
It's a
makes sense.
it's a great title, and it relates exactly to what you were just saying. Perspective shift. So we're living in a world where we value sitting still and focusing and less impulsivity and task switching. Um, and what the book argues is ADHD is not a disease or a disorder. It's not even an attention deficit problem. It's it's a trait of hunters. It's actually an evolutionary advantage for hunters to be to have ADHD traits because it would help them survive. And unfortunately, the education system as it currently is designed for farmers, quote unquote, as the kind of opposites of ADHD types. Now, it's not a binary. It's not like there's ADHD on one end and farmer on the other end. It's a spectrum, and we all have different aspects of ADHD and farmer traits. But the point is, it can be very discouraging to feel like we are broken because the system is mislabeling us with this or that disorder, when actually the reality is the systems are not yet adapted for neurodiversity in the most optimal ways. And that actually creates a huge opportunity for us, me, you, and anyone who's listening to this to be able to co-create that world which has all the different systems that are adapted for our different expressions of consciousness and humanity.
I love it. I absolutely love that, Anthony. And I think everybody has that within them. And I know some people just like to do something that, they've learned and they just go over it and over it and over it, and that's it. But I think everybody has within them something that's unique to bring, and to be able to get a focus onto that and have that drive into that, join those two things up. It's very special. And to
Yeah.
know that that's possible. I can see it in some of the young people I know. There's one young lady, and she's she's I don't know, ADHD, I think, or autistic. I'm not exactly sure which. We've had conversations about it, but when she told me, I can't remember what she is. But her whole thing was very difficult to answer questions. So if you asked her a question, she really know how to answer it. And if you give her a bit of time and made it funny, she might get around to it somehow within herself, But she's gone off and she's doing this amazing artwork and going out there, and she's created a whole business selling merchandise, really, but created this whole sort of 3D Japanese anime performance with her friends. And they've got a whole team together, and they're making money selling their merchandise. And I think it's so cool. And it's active enough, and they get to go along and create events. And so there's so many things that they're putting into this, and it's exciting and it's fun. It's just wonderful that this can happen, where people would feel that there's blocks to being able to move forward. Often young people like that have lots of sadness, that things can feel very intimidating, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the beautiful thing is we're starting to realize that and figure things out on a bit more of a deeper level. I truly think that the human brain is just as complex as the whole universe. And I think of them as a metaphor for one another, from my experiences I've had. And it's really fascinating to be able to witness our individual journey and as our collective human journey in figuring out both of those things, the brain and the universe, more and more as time goes on.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, well, I think we've basically come to the end of our time for today, Anthony. So brilliant, and thank you. Lovely speaking to you. And I guess we could
Likewise.
do this again one day.